All right, so learning objective 4 looks at ABC, but as it relates to a service business. So learning objective 2 looked at it from a manufacturing business perspective. How does it look when ABC is used in a service business? So that's basically what this objective is about. So let's get to it. So here is a public accounting firm of check and double check. Oh God, you think I'm corny? Come on. Check and double check. They're CPAs, uh, and here they have their budget for their firm, but they use a traditional costing method. So they have revenue of $4 million. Check. Um, Direct labor of 1.2 million. Check. Overhead is expected at 600,000. Check. Total costs of 1.8 million. Check. Operating income, operating profit of 2.2 million. Check. Okay. Do it again and you can double check. Oh, there's a double check for you. All right. So how did they get the overhead of 600,000? Well, they basically base overhead on direct labor. Okay. And their overhead rate is the overhead of divided by direct labor costs, which, as you see here, is 50%. Okay, so for every direct labor hour, 50% is going to be part of that cost is going to be overhead. Okay, so that's traditional. Let's assume that they record $140,000 of actual labor costs during this job audit of Plano Molding Company, in which they were billed a fee of $260,000. So this is going to be the amount they charged the company, so that's their revenue. They clearly had this much of labor costs. Under traditional costing, using 50% for their overhead would be computed as you see here. 260,000 is their revenue for this job. Direct labor, as you see here, was 140,000. Applied overhead is 50% of that, 70,000. So their operating profit for this job was $50,000. 260 minus 210 give you the profit. So that's basically using still a traditional predetermined overhead rate of 50%. Okay, that's traditionally how they would do it. What if they actually used activity-based costing? Well, first they identify the activities that are involved. So they have 3 activities that they've involved: the administration of accounts, customer development, the administration of the business, customer development, and recruiting and training. They've identified the main cost driver in each. So the main cost driver in administration is the number of partner hours. The main cost driver in customer development is the revenue billed. And the main cost driver of recruitment and training is direct professional hours. They have provided an estimated overhead cost for each of these cost drivers, totaling 600,000. They have provided you with an expected use of cost driver per activity. Okay. So here they have $335,000 of partner hours divided by an expected amount of 3,350 hours. And so it's $100 per partner hours as the overhead rate for that activity. 160,000 for revenue billed divided by the $4 million expected cost is 4 cents for every dollar of revenue that they've billed. Okay. And then they have 105,000 overhead costs for recruiting and training, 30,000 hours, $3.50 an hour is their cost. So now that we already know what their activity-based rate is for their each cost, maybe we can look at that same event a little bit differently, okay, in using the activity-based costing. All right. So when you look at the Plano audit, they go ahead and say, okay, well, we actually used 335 hours, okay, which means at $100 an hour, $33,500 of costs just for that activity. 260,000 was the revenue. That's the amount they billed that client. At 4 cents, right, each is $10,400 of costs for billing is added here. And they spent 3,800 hours at $3.50 an hour. So they actually incurred 13,300 in recruiting and training costs. So in total, their actual costs based on ABC were $57,200. Okay. Now, when you actually plug in their actual overhead costs using ABC of $57,200, two things happen. First, their expenses are smaller. Second, their profit is bigger, which means the profit margin on the account actually is much higher than what it was perceived under traditional costing. Okay. So that's important to note that when you use ABC, you're going to see differences in the overhead amount from traditional costing to using the ABC method to getting a more accurate understanding of the costs of overhead. And that is that. So here we have a do it exercise on page 153, if you have the book, but here it is in front of you, applying activity-based costing to a service business. We Carry It is a trucking company. That's good. They provide local short haul and long haul services. And they've developed the following, should be 3 cost pools, but they're a little Shakespearean here. The cost pools. We have the following the cost pools. Yes, indeed. Oh, yes. Very, very good. These cost pools, aren't they? For sure. So of the 3, they have loading and unloading, travel, and logistics. Okay. The main cost driver in loading is the number of pieces. The main cost driver in travel is the number of miles that have driven. And the main cost driver for logistics is the number of hours. They have estimated the cost of each. And they've given you the expected use per activity. So you know what you have to do here, right? We have to calculate. And so what you have here is for loading and unloading, it's 70 cents a piece, is literally per piece, literally, in overhead. For travel, it's 50 cents per mile in overhead. And for logistics, it's $30 an hour in overhead. Mm-hmm. So let's say here that they have this job in which they moved 150 pieces for 200 miles, and it required 3/4 of an hour. 0.75 is basically 45 minutes, right? 3/4 of an hour for logistics. What's the overhead that's going to be allocated to this job? Well, this is where your analysis is going to come in, right? From the previous thing. So you have 150 pieces at 70 cents a piece, 200 miles rather at 50 cents a mile, 3/4 of an hour at 30 bucks an hour. So the total amount of overhead for this job using ABC is 227.50. Very good. That's using ABC for a service business. Any questions?